So perhaps that ties into the Gordy's home thing. I mean,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's like a lot of layering going on here. Hey, catching up with Nope. It's Christy and Alonso. She was on vacation, so we're a little late. But because we're a little late, we're going to spoil the shit out of this. So if you haven't seen Nope yet, if you don't want to know what happens in Nope, stop now. But we're going to totally talk about it, stem to stern, all the things. Here we go.
Are you ready? Here we go.
I dragged my husband and my son to see this at an IMAX theater in Montreal, the same place where we saw Dunkirk 5 years ago. I'm like, if we can see Nope in IMAX, let's do that. Take
a vacation, woman. You could have seen it in IMAX back home.
I know, but it was good to get it done. I really wanted to see it. So and we had a great long talk about it on the walk home afterwards. So it's a movie you've got to talk about. So I'm so happy to talk about it here with you. So yeah, we're going to spoil it. It's got to happen because there's way too much to work through here. This is the latest from writer-director Jordan Peele following Get Out and Us. He is dealing with some of the same themes, but also getting his arms around a whole bunch of other ones with varying degrees of success. Daniel Kaluuya and Keke Palmer play brother and sister who have grown up on a horse ranch in Santa Clarita, north of Los Angeles. Their family for generations has raised and trained horses for use in the movies. And this is very, very important because so much of this film is about stardom and Hollywood and being peripheral to it, but striving for something greater. Early in the film, their father, played by Keith David, is on a horse and suddenly just falls off of it. Like stuff is falling from the sky and it pierces him and leads to his death. And what we end up discovering is that there's some kind of UFO. There's something out there. There's some cloud out there in the distance and it's not moving. And there's something passing by and they think they see it. And Keke Palmer's character, Emerald, wants to catch a shot of that. She wants to seize a little bit of that for some fame and some fortune. And Daniel Kaluuya who's named OJ, not
Otis Jr.
Right, not in any way a coincidence. His name happens to be OJ. Is skeptical, but then down the road a piece is Steven Yeun, who was a child star on this 90s sitcom where this horrific mauling occurred with the chimp. Is this wacky, very, very 90s sitcom called Gordy's Home. Like they get the production design right on this thing with like the staircase and the living room and just the bag clothes and all that. He has taken that fame and that infamy and turned it into this like Western theme park in Santa Clarita. For those of you guys who don't know, a lot of stuff gets shot in Santa Clarita because it's like 30 miles north of LA. It still can be a Western, enough of it is still rural enough where you're close to LA, but can shoot something that can look older. But for years, stuff has been shot there. And that's why this takes place. But the flying saucer thing that's in there, if you look at it, if you get drawn into it, it sucks you into it. Like it's literally a giant flying asshole that like chews you up and spits you back out again. And I think what this is a metaphor for the perils of seeking fame and fortune and seeking like easy access to glory. The cinematographer that they work with to catch the shot, played by Michael Wincott. He says a thing that made it click in my head where he goes, that dream you have where you're trying to climb to the top of the mountain and stay there is a dream from which you never wake. And I think that's what this is about. I think it's about the perils of seeking fame because Steven Yeun, who had been a 90s child star, is constantly trying to like hustle to exploit that fame, even though it ends up being his undoing. Keke Palmer, when she comes in on set of this commercial that they're on with a horse they've trained, like uses it, like she's like literally shucking and jiving at this moment to like hustle her own side gigs. And like only when people set aside their own individual interests in fame and glory and learn to work as a team and not look up at that thing, are they going to survive? That's my thinking on this. What's your read?
Yeah. My thing about this movie is that I get all of that and all of that is there. And this is a movie that is brimming over with ideas and metaphors and reference points. And, like the fact that they have like a Buck and the Preacher poster in the living room, which is a legendary Black Western directed by Sidney Poitier. The fact that like, Stephen Yeun's character is so traumatized by this event that happened to him as a kid that he can only describe it in terms of the SNL sketch they did about it. The fact that the guy who comes in at the end, who is a reporter for TMZ, is wearing an outfit that is entirely a mirror. You know, like this movie is constantly just throwing these concepts at you, and they're all interesting and they're relevant. And I see all the many points that Jordan Peele is trying to make, but it never for me cohered to be a movie. Like I felt like I was walking into an attic and I was looking at all these things piled up, like, oh, there's that, and there's that, and there's that. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's kind of cool. And I like the performances. And it's shot really well by Hoyte van Hoytema, who like makes the most of the IMAX cameras. Does some really great like nighttime stuff, especially with like Kaluuya and shadow. But ultimately, I kind of felt like this was less of a film or a narrative story and more of Jordan Peele's bulletin board of things that were stuck to it, of like, I want to include this, I want to make sure we talk about this, and I want to look at this and explore that. But there's no movie. That was my thing.
No, you're absolutely right. And he's got so many different ideas he wants to explore, but it's messy, it's unwieldy, and it never coheres. And then like toward the end, when the spaceship metamorphosizes into like this giant flying like gauzy butterfly thing, but the center of it still looks like a camera lens.
Yes.
Right. Again, like, what is that about? Like that it's beautiful and elusive, this idea of fame and fortune and glory.
That it's hypnotic. The thing is also like, I get the idea of like, if you look at it, it kills you, and how that reads into everything about what the movie's saying about observing and being observed, you know. But like the idea that this giant thing in space can tell whether or not a tiny human being is looking at it or not. I just was like, okay, Jordan Peele. So I think the ideas overwhelm the story.
There is legitimate tension though for a long time before you know what's going on.
Sure.
Or before you can even begin to ascertain what is going on, before you can formulate a theory, because everyone's going to come at this totally differently.
I want to shout out Brandon Perea, who plays the Fry's clerk, who comes to help them out with installing cameras on the ranch. I'd never heard of this guy before, and I thought he was very funny and was a real scene stealer. And even the fact that it's Fry's is a joke that Jordan Peele is working, because the facade of the building with the spaceship crashing into it, you know, in the Burbank store, like ties into the whole UFO theme. He cast Michael Wincott, I'm guessing, because Michael Wincott happened to be on the set of The Crow the day that Brandon Lee died.
Oh,
so perhaps that ties into the Gordy's home thing. I mean,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's like a lot of layering going on here, but I just
so
don't
much.
I all I see is layers and not a finish.
A point. Right? Like, what is the point of the layers? Are the layers the point? And it's just to have the conversation. I love that we're having the conversation. I love that I walked with my husband and son through the streets of Montreal and had this conversation, because we all had really different takes on it. And then an old friend of mine from the AP posted an article from a Jewish website about all of the Judaism symbolism in here, like the number 613, which is very important in Judaism. You see it throughout, like the massacre on the sitcom set lasted for exactly 6 minutes and 13 seconds in Stephen Yeun's telling of it.
Wow.
When he stages his little show and tell thing with the UFO, he says at exactly 6:13, this is going to happen. So there's all of that. His name is OJ. Like, why is he named OJ?
Well, at one point she says, "Run, OJ,
run, OJ, run!" Right, but like, what is the point of that?
Her name is Emerald. Is that supposed to be a Wizard of Oz shout out? I don't know.
Oh, interesting. She's wearing a Canyon Country High School soccer jersey, so it's like specific to this place where there's a whole lot of Hollywood lore where they shoot a whole bunch of stuff. It's beautiful. Like, Hoyte van Hoytema is usually Christopher Nolan's DP these days, and so he shot like Interstellar and Tenet, and the stuff at night is like mystical and suspenseful and terrifying. The way they use the flashbacks to the massacre with the chimp, like,
genuinely unsettling.
Totally. When we first see the young Stephen Yeun beneath the table, he's splattered with blood and he's trembling in fear. Next time we see him, his shirt is white and he's clean. And so you're like, oh shit, like how does he get covered in blood? Like, how is this going to happen? There's a lot of legitimate tension. The thing with the blood coming down the walls of the house is like something out of The Shining. I mean, again, and yet another touchstone. There are so many touchstones here. I was into it for a while, but afterward, I'm just like, I don't know what you're trying to tell me, Jordan Peele.
Yeah, I'm very ambivalent about it, but again, it was sort of, I mean, this is kind of the issue that I had with Us, which was you've created this really rich backstory explanation of this thing, and yet you either needed to tell us a lot more or a lot less. You either needed to live like in the mystery and be this sort of like enigmatic thing that we have to figure out, or you've told us just enough to be like, well, okay, now you need to really walk us through this last part because none of this makes any literal sense. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, look, Get Out, absolute masterpiece, no question, like one of the great first films ever made. But I feel like with these next two, he is throwing his arms around a lot of stuff, and the stuff is fascinating, but his hands don't touch. I don't know what the metaphor here is. Anyway, if you love this movie, I understand why you love this movie. I wish I did, frankly, because there are things about it that I find so appealing, but ultimately it just left me bothered because it just seems like again, there's this, he's got all these things lying around, but he doesn't make a thing out of them.
And yet, how often do you and I get to have this kind of conversation?
Also true.
Right? So I love that for it. So I'm saying 6.
I said 5. And again, I had like a matter of hours between seeing the movie and the embargo lifting. So I really had to like go quickly. I would probably go a little higher now, but not much higher than 6, I think, just because as much as I admire the pieces, the whole leaves me cold.